Thanks for joining us again. It's Jennifer David, and I have a special guest today to come on and talk with us about legislation and how to advocate. And I really don't know everything she's going to talk about because I kind of left it in her hands. But please welcome my friend, Michelle Higgs. I need to get
Yeah, I know,
applause.
right? It's like applause, right? No, thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Yeah, so I'm Michelle Higgs, and I was former candidate for House District 60, which includes parts of Monroe, Morgan, and Johnson counties. And I met Jennifer when we started to develop the Indiana Rural Summit, which was a cohort of House candidates spanning across southern Indiana, and we actually connected about 30 counties, very intentionally working across our gerrymandered districts and finding where we were particularly sharing borders and base and really trying to bring conversations of rural voters
Yes, which is
in.
very much Southern
Yeah,
Indiana and Central. I mean, it's really Indiana in
it's
general.
all
Like,
over.
yeah,
And yet they have successfully, through gerrymandering and redistricting and all of that, successfully managed to isolate us, even when we are next to major city centers or employers. Oftentimes, the rural folk are just kind of left out.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and
Well, I read, and I'm so I have this is only our second episode, so I haven't talked a lot about the fact that I did run for state representative on the Democrat ticket, which I guess is probably the first time I've really said that for District 66, which is in Southern Indiana. And so my senator is Gardner, right? And yesterday there was something about the rural communities and the hospitals because they have closed
yes,
up, and I've seen them close up in the areas that I live and I work. And his
do you
comment
want me
was, "Go
do you want
ahead."
me to read his comment? Because, oh yes. It was. This was with regard to House Bill 1004, which is really addressing the fact that we do have nonprofit hospitals that have probably not used their resources as well as we would like. But the way that the legislature is approaching it, it actually is risking us losing our rural health care. So, again, I always keep going back to if your goal is only about reducing cost and looking at everything from a profit motivated um, ideology, you're going to actually throw the baby out with the bathwater every single time.
That's
And
so funny because that's how we ended this
I
section
think,
that I was talking with Jennifer. We were talking about the behavior business and we were talking about the work and the families and all that, but that we are still businesses. But the first forefront is that we are in the helping profession. So, do you have the quote on, or kind
yes,
of like
I
the
do.
background and the quote on what he said?
Yeah. So the quote is, it costs rural hospitals more to deliver care in these rural areas. That's just the reality. We also got to accept that if you live in rural Indiana, you have made that choice. Nobody forced you to move to rural Indiana where you are far away from a system where you are in an area where it costs more to deliver care. There are choices to be made in this space.
I can tell you how, not even on a political level, just on an intelligence level, like this is Indiana.
Yeah.
These are like, we have, like, what do they call them, legacy farms. We have farmers like these are generations of farmers who literally are fighting every single day, and a lot of these families have family members with disabilities. I mean, the entire area that I was running for is rural, and I cannot tell you how many family members, people with disabilities I met, people in like the helping profession that didn't even know anything about the Medicaid waiver program, teachers that were teaching in developmental preschools that didn't know anything about the Medicaid waiver program. So, like, and this is just all over Indiana.
Yeah.
Even if
And
you
as
live
a matter of
in
fact,
Indianapolis,
yeah, and we've already maxed out our Medicaid waivers, right?
yes,
So
yes.
I mean, the need is great. And the thing that I don't hear coming from the State House is really asking the question of why. Like they're going, oh, the Medicaid costs have gone up so much, but you're not talking about, well, why are there more people on Medicaid?
Well,
What's
and I'm sure
happening?
that's just going to go up with all the job. Like, we're not even
Yeah.
talking about jobs yet. And the
Well,
job
well, here's the thing. Again, I look at it and you look at it, everything is interconnected, right? And
very much.
it starts with our environment. If our air, our soil, our water has contaminants, it creates and impacts health. Guess what? If we do not have pregnant worker accommodations and women that can get access to prenatal care,
Yeah.
we're going to have problems, developmental problems, all sorts of things.
Mhm.
And so it begs the question, when are we going to focus on healthcare and on the needs of people and put people first?
Yeah.
And profits are, yeah, that's a thing, but it cannot be over the prioritization of people. If you center people, everything else will work out.
Some of that also just goes back to something that I really, a term I really learned about. I mean, I know it, but like that we don't have a healthcare, what is it, a sick, what is that term where our system is like, we're not preventative
No, no.
particularly. It's the after the fact. Like
It's
we're,
disease management. We're into disease management.
well, I was,
And yeah, I think the way that so much legislation gets passed and the way definitely our budgets are, it feels like there are groups of people that are expendable, that they're invisible, so they're not even thought about when budgets are being formed, and they're definitely being exploited to
oh, for sure.
benefit certain corporate interests. And so to me, going back to Chris Garton's comments on the rule. It was just last year dealing with the same issue around healthcare costs that he made this quote. And this was from like June 13th, 2024. Capital Chronicle said, he said, I quote, "There's a very long pipeline of integrated healthcare entities top to bottom. This pipeline is wrought with, I think, a lot of opportunity to really improve the system, improve outcomes in the healthcare space, but also improve price as well. And I think we do that through free market principles and competition." So, to the very same entities and groups that he's talking about, free market principles and competition, in 1 year, they have not improved any of that. And now he's basically saying, rule folks, sorry, we give up, just move.
But that's like his district.
District.
It's, I
Yes.
mean, I saw that on Facebook, and that's the first thing I said. I was like, isn't his district
Yeah.
rural? Like it's Clark and Floyd counties.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's part of Scott County or not, but I mean, the northern part of Clark is all
Yeah.
rural,
And and so to me, I just feel like that speaks to a lack of an imagination of abundance, a lack of an imagination of how do we solve these big problems, but you solve them by actually bringing in those that are most impacted. And you and I, we've
Absolutely.
talked about this at length. It's like if you're working with the disability community, you bring the disability community in. They will tell you where you can save money, where they're seeing where there's waste over
Well,
and over.
but so I've been trying to do that on my end with behavior consulting because we will be on the chopping block. Behavior consulting services on the Medicaid waiver program is the most expensive service on the family supports and the CIH waiver. And those Medicaid waivers are the largest portion of the budget for Medicaid. So I have sent out some surveys, asked a lot of behavior consultants for their input, kind of put a top 10 list together that I've sent to only one legislator at this point, and am wanting to get some more input and trying to send it on to some other. But it goes to the point of asking the people in the field, like being proactive, like instead of all this, having somebody come in, doge or whatever, give people that do the work an opportunity. It is just the same as giving the people that do the work the opportunity to help create the policies and the procedures and the rules. And for some reason, we just don't look to the people that actually do the work, that have the information,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
politics.
Well, Could you explain a little bit? I know we talk back and forth about these Medicaid waivers. Can you explain a little bit about what that means?
A Medicaid waiver is basically, the term waiver comes from waiving your right to live in an institution. So, I was born in 72. I have a sibling who was born in 76. She has cerebral palsy. I know when she was born, they told my parents she wouldn't live past the age of 4. I'm pretty sure almost every family I spoke to that has a child that lives with cerebral palsy has been told something similar. They also told her to put her in an institution. And Indiana actually has done some things pretty good. Indiana is one of the few states that does not have those huge institutions. When I moved here in 2000, they were breaking down Muscatatuck. Um, and then there was Fort Wayne Developmental Center. So, and even the group homes, they used to have these large things called ICFMRs, and they were like 30 plus people, large places for people to live. So basically, that's where we would put people with disabilities. And so instead of being institutionalized, you waive your right to be institutionalized, and instead you get to receive your services in the community. That's why they're called home and community based waivers. I've never really explained it like that, but I feel like I did pretty good. So did that answer? Did that
Yeah,
help?
yeah. Well,
You probably already know I'm explaining it for everyone else.
maybe you can also explain like why is it significant to have people based in their home or their communities or integrated into everyday life versus being separated out?
Excuse me. Because it's a basic human right. I mean, to live, to be able to prosper. Um, I can't really tell you any reason other than that's just how it should be. I mean, like, there's a million reasons. I could tell you a million reasons, research this and that, but it's just that we are human beings, and that's literally the only thing that you need to know. That's everything should just be based, you know, on that. It doesn't matter how much money a family has. It doesn't matter what disability their child has or the adult has, what nationality, what gender they.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that is really, but there's also the term separating out, which sometimes I have a hard time with that because I also feel that sometimes we push so hard of the idea of having people integrated into the community that we don't spend the time asking them what that integration looks like or what they want that to be. Because it's always like people with disabilities, they can't be segregated, don't have them like, but I'm autistic and I can tell you right now, the most people that I feel comfortable with are the people that are similar to me. It doesn't mean I need to live in a facility with 50 of them, but it does. And I've made some drastic changes in my life since I've learned that because of things I already knew and the reality of what life is like for me. And so people, we don't want to also be too quick to just put people anywhere. And that does happen a lot of times because there are issues with being integrated in the community because a lot of people end up in situations with roommates, roommates that could be abusive to them. So many times people end up with roommates who, you might have somebody who is able to get around and is very passionate about wanting to get in the community and do stuff, but then they get paired up with a roommate who maybe that's not the lifestyle that he has, or maybe he's not physically able to, or has some health issues. And then that ends up creating just a lot of other issues for the other individuals. So it's definitely not a perfect system, but it's definitely better than being in a large institution. So it is kind of, they have to waive their right. Like the only right initially was to be in an institution. The more I think about this whole term, like that is the only right you have. You have a disability. So initially we're going to put you in an institution, but now we're going to waive your right so you can live, in the community. But
Yeah.
in the end, they are good programs that families very much need. Very
Well, and
much.
I guess I look at this as being if we as a state um, are committed to our people, irregardless of their abilities, right? And then we need to have a vision that is covering all of those needs. And again, we talk about this a lot where, so if Indiana is what, fifth in the nation for uh, pro-business, but 49th for quality of life, that speaks to a set of priorities that's attracting one group and exploiting another.
Well,
And to me, what I would rather see is, we need to move up in quality of life and invite the businesses that share those values. Um, and so there's a lot of things where if we're having budget shortfalls, then we need to reevaluate what those priorities are. And instead of always looking to cut the cost from the most vulnerable.
well, and
Um,
you've seen this. It happened last year. It happens every legislative session. Medicaid, whether it's at the state level or at the national level, it's always on the chopping block. And these families spend, January, February, March, those horrible months of the year, having to advocate, speak out, make phone calls, do letters, voicemails, text messages, videos, and all this stuff. Again, advocating for the same thing that they advocated for the year before. We're not adding stuff. We just continue, we're taking away, and Indiana continues to take away. I mean, hopefully we'll be able to preserve what we have and move forward and try to add to some of that. But there does need to be some changes to these programs. Um, but we got to keep them first.
yeah, yeah.
So, can you talk a little bit about kind of how I know you've got a couple organizations that you're involved in? You founded the Indiana Rural Summit, and then you're also working with another organization.
Yeah, so organizing Indiana
Okay.
and yeah, I'm happy to share about that. So first off with the Indiana Rules Summit, um, that came about when I decided to run for office and I realized that running in a very red district, very gerrymandered district, there was just not a lot of support that was available coming from the Democratic Party or just anywhere in that regard. But also more importantly, one of the things that I talk about, I've lived outside of Indiana, so even though I graduated high school here, shortly after I moved and lived a fair bit in Los Angeles. So then coming back from Los Angeles in 2016 to be near my family here. Um, when I lived in LA and I would tell people I'm from Indiana and they'd go, "Oh, that's a flyover state," or, what's happening in Indiana? You guys just grow corn, kind of, And I would laugh, I'd do whatever, but secretly inside, I would get really upset because it just seemed to minimize. First off, when we're talking about the Midwest and states like Indiana that grow agriculture, that
Yeah.
it's you're good luck, feeding animals or feeding people when you don't have that available. So, there's just a lack of respect, I think, from a lot of people when they talk about rural spaces and really what's happening there.
I
Um,
have to add on to that real quick. I've lived in 20 plus states. My
oh
dad was
gosh,
a basketball coach. We
yes,
moved all the time. He was born in California. I had my daughters in California, but I'd lived in many places. But I grew up in the Midwest, and I chose to come back to the Midwest because I like the Midwest.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's just a different life, but I think if you're probably not from here, you don't know that. Like, I didn't like California. I mean, it'd have been great if I was rich and had money and didn't have four kids, could just kind of do what you see on TV. But California is not what you see on the shows on TV.
yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely miss the weather there, and there's certain elements that, that I loved, but when I moved back to Indiana, and then I would talk to my friends back in California, and they're like, "Well, what's it like being back in Indiana?" I go, that favorite pair of jeans in the back of your closet that, you put on and you love, and they're old and tattered or whatever, but it's like, oh man, that's to me what living in the Midwest is because um, country roads
Oh,
and
I love driving around the country roads
seeing the
in Indiana.
ponds and the lakes and whatnot. It's like, yeah, so
And
I
we're a lot to
love
be proud of. Like Indiana is a great state. I love Indiana.
well, and when you start to just drive around the small towns,
Oh
right,
yeah.
and you're seeing, this is where I do grieve, like we've lost our little cafes. and our local shops. As more things move to online,
Mm.
more things move to, well, we're going to have this franchise and that franchise. It starts to sometimes all look the same, right? And I miss the I don't know, just the things that would be unique about a community. And I think that there's a lot of towns that really struggle and try hard to maintain their identity in
Oh
the
yeah.
midst. And I will, again, kudos to my hometown Martinsville because they've had a big, huge effort to revitalize their town square, and they're bringing back a theater, and they've got an
Oh,
outdoor
they
little
are? I did not know that that was your
yes.
hometown because I moved down south from Mooresville.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, my all my kids graduated there and everything. So
Yeah, so for me, just to be able to go and see that there is a revitalization happening, and particularly anything around the arts. If I start to see things that are
oh
happening
yeah, you got money for
around the
art.
arts, well, it's that, but it's also creativity,
Well,
right?
and investment in the community. So
Yeah.
do you notice in your community, because I am lucky where I live, um, our mayor definitely prioritizes the people in our community, and that includes especially people with disabilities. How do you feel that this is for people with disabilities and families with disabilities? Do you see that they're being brought along with the revitalization and things that go on in Martinsville? Because I know that there is several good big service providers out there. There's a day program. Sycamore has a day program there. So kind of what do you see going on for that group of folks?
I definitely just a huge commitment to those groups and people and what they're doing. I think that particularly around the recovery community,
Absolutely, yes. I mean, that's something that became very evident in my campaigning.
yeah. And so I think that, what I'm seeing is just an investment. Again, it's an investment in people and seeing people and really recognizing that this is a need. And I will also say that probably one of the biggest challenges is I'm gonna, name a former candidate that was part of the Rural Summit, Thomas Horrocks. He
Mhm.
ran for House
Oh
District
yeah,
62. But one of the things that he stated very early on was he goes, charity cannot fix what bad policy creates,
this is true. Mhm.
right? And so what I see is organizations, charities and whatnot, nonprofits stepping up and they're doing all they can
They are.
to fill these gaps. Um, but it's easily overwhelming and we're burning people out. And so I think that where and this worries me too, going back to the state budget, that if they're, with the property taxes, if they're looking to have local municipalities hold that and have to reduce their budgets so drastically, I don't know. I feel like we keep kicking the can down the road to somebody else, and
Oh yeah.
it directly impacts, all those communities. So, um, yeah, I think that it's just a lack of bringing as many voices to the table
You
to,
have to make a noise. And so I want to go back to the recovery network. I need to have some
yeah.
of those folks come on because that is something that I just really noticed. So when I was running for office in Scott County is like the last in Indiana for like health outcomes. And they have just a huge recovery um, groups there helping, all working together. And then down in Clark County and Floyd County, they have a problem solving court. They just have all sorts of great things going on. They have like these recovery cafes where people come in. Those are throughout the state. I think they're throughout the state. So this is an effort. This is part of legislation and stuff like that. And like these recovery cafes, like that needs to be a thing for families with disabilities. I know that BDS goes around and they have some meetings here and there, but like for families, especially in these rural communities, to have once a month or here there or even, well, I mean they need it all the time, but a place that they could come in and they could meet with other families, they could get information about resources and supports and the waivers. Like I would love to see something like that. I try to do things like that in my business where I'm at, but again, you can only do so much. And I am a for-profit company, but I put so much, and that's why I am a for-profit company, because I can control what I do with the money. I can put as much money back into the community and the type of people that I want, and I do. But if we're not having good policies, if I'm not making money, if I can't pay my people, I don't have that money to do those extra things. And so, whether you're for profit or nonprofit, if there's not the money and the things that have been promised, like, companies that were given grant money and then all of a sudden, oh, we're going to freeze the grant money or you're not going to get it. Like, that is very problematic. And there's immediate effects, but we've yet to see any of those kind of ripple effects.
Oh, and you
Coming.
mentioned grants, and I do want to just name for the audience because a lot of people don't realize when it comes to grants, there's some grants where, you apply for the grant, you get the money, and then you spend the money. Federal grants, by and large, are the reverse, where you have to spend the money, show the receipts, and then the federal grant reimburses. So when we're hearing about organizations that are having to make drastic cuts because their grants have been frozen, it's because they had already been lined up.
And they're in the hole then, and they're probably were
Yeah,
already almost operating in the red. I mean,
yes,
you're
they
running a
are. And
business,
yeah,
especially a social service or humanitarian type
yes.
business, like you're making it month to month to month to month.
Right. And so you have already, because you have been awarded this and you're moving forward and now it's getting ready, again, Congress approved it, blah, blah, blah. Like you've got this whole system that's in operation. And so to arbitrarily then go back and then freeze funds, um, for many many groups it is absolutely destructive and what they're needing to do. And so then if you go back to if our state budget is looking at, well, we're going to rely on the nonprofits and the nonprofits are relying on the federal government.
Hmm.
Do you see, like
Yeah,
we're
yeah, yeah.
ready
I didn't
for a
even, yeah, think
tsunami?
about
Yeah,
that
it's a
thing.
tsunami effect. And this is one of the reasons where like going back to the rural summit, yes, we were looking at the Rural Summit as a way of kind of connecting our gerrymandered districts
But
for
also, like,
electoral
you picked
purposes.
people, like you kind of handpicked certain candidates based on some of the, like, not necessarily like the types of people or things that they could bring to the table. Because, like, I know for me, because of my work with people with
Yeah,
disabilities, so kind of how does that fit in? Like, so for families, because I know every time I spoke, it doesn't matter what it was about, it ended up being about people with disabilities. Because that's just naturally, obviously, now I know who I am. But whether it was like, because we put on different events throughout the state, like other candidates, like they learned from me, I
yeah,
learned from them. So, like, these candidates were able to kind of walk away also with more ideas and information and maybe challenging their own ideas about people with disabilities. So, kind of
yeah,
how can families, because I know, we got 2026, how
yeah.
can families help and be involved in some of these things, to help
Well,
advocate for themselves?
I think the most important, I'll be honest, is people in their own communities. They know their community leaders. They can
Or
see and
they don't.
identify. Or yeah, but they can start to see and identify like when this person stands at the front of the room and I trust what they say, right? And it really begins to be a thing of can we start to surface within our own communities these leaders that have some good ideas, that are passionate about seeing change, and that can start to connect. Then that's who we really want to be starting to proposition. Go, hey, have you ever considered running for an elected office? All the way from very local level, all the way further up. But um, I think we get so used to this idea that first off, somebody else is going to come save us, or you know, the wealthy businessman down the road. Oh, they're the natural leader. Not no. Um, I think we forget that we ourselves,
The everyday person.
yeah, and
Like,
as a matter of fact, it is in those voices, the experience and the willingness to, to listen to others and to, it's like I would much rather have a leader who is skilled at listening and taking all of this input and synthesizing it and then moving everybody in a shared direction than I would somebody who wants to be a lone ranger and has an ego. And I think we have so many egotistical people who have been told and patted on the back, "Oh, aren't you a great leader?" But the reality is they're maybe just very charismatic and very
Well,
outgoing.
maybe we need to change what leadership is and what it
Yeah.
looks like. And I would say that this should be a call out for, I have met some of the, what I've learned the most from has been the families and the parents that I work with. And, some of these people are amazing. They have advocated and just done so much hard work. And so this is a call out for some of them to try to run for office, whether it is your
Yeah.
trustee board, which I think that's coming up in 26, and the township
Yep.
trustees, sheriffs, things like that. No matter how small it is, like being able to get out there and advocating for people and families with disabilities, making a louder voice instead of just making it when we're having, I know families are exhausted, but instead of just these months when the legislators are in office. I ran. I didn't ever think that there was a chance I would win, and I'm gonna probably run again, and probably don't know if there's a chance that I win, but I am running because I want to make a noise about what is going on with Medicaid, things
Yeah.
within the system, advocating for families. And so it's just like anything else. You can't necessarily go into it with like, it's not the outcome, it's the journey. And I could tell you that for myself in the, last year that I went on this journey, I had no idea. So I guess
Yeah.
if you you don't want to learn that you're autistic, maybe don't run for state representative, but
Well, the other thing, and I realized like we started talking about the Rural Summit, got sidetracked. So let me go back because I know people are probably listening, going, "Okay, I still don't know what the Rural
that's
Summit is."
okay. We'll cut it off.
We'll do it all. But
All
but but yeah, no, the thing with the Rural Summit is the gist of it was to create a network, a cohort of these candidates so that and it kind of started organically where I started talking to Thomas Horrocks, who is a neighboring district. And then I also share a county, Johnson County, with Michael Potter.
Mhm.
Where the idea germinated from was a gentleman named Curtis Cummings, and he was running for House District. I can't think of which one it was, but it was Vigo and Owen counties. And he had in Vigo County, they were dealing with an environmental issue. They had carbon sequestration
Oh,
that was coming in and trying to eminent domain farms and land. And it was a mess. And I remember he had written a letter to a local group, just kind of outlining like this is what we're dealing with, and we're going to these meetings, and nobody's really listening to the voice of the people and that kind of thing. And it struck me how similar it was to environmental issues that had happened in Morgan County in Martinsville around water,
oh
and
yeah.
just how long people had been crying out, going, "There's a problem, there's a problem." And finally it got taken seriously. And so I thought I would love for my Morgan County base to be aware that the environmental problems over here, even though it's one's water, one's carbon, it's they're very similar. They're very similar. And and then finding out that Michael Potter, as a candidate, he was an
Environmentalist.
environmental engineer.
Yeah.
So that immediately was like suddenly I started to think, wouldn't this be good to just start to connect? And I don't know about you, but part of the challenge too, when you decide to run for office, sometimes it can feel very isolating. Like you
Really?
have a team of people
No.
supporting you, but at the same time, you're you're now for the very first time maybe in your life are stepping into a public space like you've never done
Oh my
before,
gosh, yes. Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
so just in being able to talk with another candidate and go, "Oh, this feels this way," or "I'm struggling here," or "I just had this amazing conversation, let me share it." It took what was already, it's a stressful thing, but it made it fun. It made the journey. You're talking about it made the journey fun because you weren't alone in it. And when we just started to look at where the different pockets of people that we knew were, we started to connect this house candidate and that house candidate and that house candidate. And actually it was my husband who said, you guys should have like a band tour. And you go from a place to place, but you go together. And then the more we thought about it, we're like, actually, that's not a bad idea because we're already dealing with people who, for the most part, feel like their values aren't being represented and they kind of feel very alone in their rural spaces. It's like, does anybody else see that we need more disability rights? Does anybody else see that we have issues around housing or healthcare? And and so then the idea was, well, if we show up and we're bringing some of our supporters, you can actually begin to fill a room
Mhm.
before you've even done local outreach. And I don't know about you, but I've been to many a meeting where you get there and there's five other people in a room and you're like,
That's like a
oh,
lot of, yeah. I mean, it doesn't
yeah,
matter where you go. Not anymore, though. If you could get a
not
politician in a
anymore.
room,
Right.
you're going to
But
be like full.
yeah. But when you walk into a room and there's 50 people, there's 75, there's 100, it's like you're going, oh, there's energy. There's energy. And that was the thing that I saw. It's like we have got to get people engaged because we're never going to change who's at the top of the ballot. We're not going to change and win statewide races and definitely not at a national level if we cannot get people engaged to vote. And if they don't think their voices matter, then they sure as heck don't think their votes matter.
Well,
So, yeah.
I think one of the things is though, with all the candidates that we had in the summit, and then, we were working with Jennifer McCormick, who was running for lieutenant or was running for governor. And she really championed education. She was special ed teacher too. So she had really advocated for that. Every one of the different people, like even Michael, who, is an environmentalist, everybody had some kind of connection or they're kind of like what they worked with or what they did with somehow also touched with people with disabilities
Yeah.
because it is just so prevalent and
Yeah.
so many of these other things do affect or even cause disabilities. I mean, if you live to a certain age, chances are every one of us is going to have some type of disability in our lifetime. So, but this really just goes to show, like, so this all just started like a year ago, at the middle of a campaign season. Like that was the whole point of it.
Yeah.
But you were just a lone person. We had a bunch of lone candidates that just really didn't have any support. And so now, because many of us are running again, I have gotten emails from the Democrat Party where like they're using us, they're using you and what you created in that period of time, which is so great because it just goes to show the power of people and community and coming together and working together. Um, so I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm excited too. And that goes on to the organizing Indiana. And the idea from that came where there many times I'd be door knocking. And of course, people are like, yes, I want to vote, but what else can I do in the meantime? And there's many amazing organizations, but I'm not going to remember them at the top of my head, right? And so I was like, I wish that there was one central place I could send people. But more importantly, there's people in communities that are like, we need something that does XYZ. They don't necessarily know that there's an organization that's already maybe doing that. And so
Is that what
oftentimes,
that is?
yeah, yeah.
How much I stay up on things. I can't keep up on everything.
Yeah. And so rather than having a lot of people recreating the wheel
Right.
and
Yeah.
burning
Yeah.
out, it's like we need to have a better lay of the land and what are all the resources that are already there that we just plug into and then we build off of that.
Right. Yeah.
And so my husband and I, we talked about it a couple years ago and we'd secured the domain name organizingindiana.org and we're like, let's just wait and see. Well, then we started to see the big national rallies start to happen, right? And all of a sudden, I'm in chat rooms and Facebook groups, and people are asking these same questions. And I'm like, we need to fast track this and at least at minimum give people a place to go that's like a one stop, and then they can go from there and figure out where they need to be. And so what we did was we're in the process of doing the website, but in the meantime, we created a link tree that has a way, lists of places and things to do to take action.
Yes.
There lists of newsletters that are recommended, media and podcasts is recommended, and then a whole slew of organizations that are really mobilizing people at a grassroots level.
Good.
And these are all values aligned with us. And then the hope is that as people are getting more engaged in those grassroots spaces, then as candidates emerge in their districts, they can pivot and then also start to champion those values aligned candidates.
Yes.
Uh, and so, because the reality is we're not going to change policy unless we actually change our legislators that
Right.
are really deeply listening to their constituents. So, yeah.
Well, and from what I see on the internet and on the news, that might be happening eventually. I mean, people can
Yeah.
only take so much. I mean, when you have nothing left,
Yeah,
you
that's the
know.
thing. It's like, and the other thing that I tell people, and we communicate a lot, and the lovely thing is that it's really the kind of taken off nationally. There's a woman, a researcher named Erica Chenoweth, and about 10 years ago or so, she had done some deep research around nonviolent resistant movements and the transformative impact that they can have. And she came up with that if you can get 3.5% of any given population to be actively, regularly engaged in nonviolent activity, that is transformative for a community. And
Oh yeah,
so,
for sure.
right. And so what I did was I started to look at my surrounding counties and seeing what is 3.5% of Monroe County, what's 3.5% of Morgan County, and then further drilling that down to um, what is 10%. It's like if I bring that down to 10%, then it's like, um, for example, if there's 1,920 people that represents 3.5%, then that's actually 192 people bringing in 10 people.
That's a lot.
When you start to think about you, Jennifer, can you organize 10 people?
I hope so. I got at least
Yeah.
10 people to work for me. So
Yeah. So
probably.
you just but that's the thing is you start to ask people and it gives that easy on-ramp because I think part of the problem is it's such a big overwhelming problem. Like when you see everything, it just feels so overwhelming. It's like,
Oh
what
yeah.
can I do? And you think about particularly in the disability community where people many times they can't really easily get places, right? So there's oftentimes a lack of an imagination of what they can do.
True.
Um, and I think the more that families in that space and individuals in that space say, actually, this is what I can really do. For example, we've got 5 calls, right? The app 5 calls allows people to immediately connect with their legislators on any given issue with scripts and stuff. Many people in the disability community can do that,
Oh yeah, and they
right?
do.
And they do. And so can they organize 10 other people to do that with them? Can, right? And so you just start to think like what, postcards. People are sending certain postcards on certain days. There's organizations that are doing that,
That's
that will
true.
work with people that can do that. So part of it is really just looking at what is the activity that some group is doing. Does it translate well into the community that you are actively in part of?
Hmm.
Can you organize 10 people to do it? Can
Hmm.
you mobilize, whatever, and just start to think of the power of one person making a
Hmm.
decision to participate in nonviolent resistance movement of whatever it might be. The other thing that I tell people is so you're doing that, but you're also at your very local level, attend every possible meeting in your town. You've
Hmm.
got local leaders that are doing some amazing things. They're trying to make bricks with very little straw right now, and it's going to be harder for them going forward. And I think if people are showing up in these meetings, but they're showing up to listen and they're showing up to bring ideas and they're showing up to hold the elected officials accountable,
Oh,
you're going to
absolutely.
quickly know the ones that you can work with and the ones that don't want to, and the ones that are unwilling to work with us, vote them out.
Yeah. Well, I will. So in our town, like all of the meetings are recorded
Mhm.
and they're done in real time. So if you can't go, you can watch it in real time, but they're also recorded and put out there so people can watch them later. You can listen to it, at work or something. But that's, I mean, honestly, getting to meet my mayor, Mayor Treva Hodges, and then doing some things with her really ended up being what led me to run for state rep. It's not that she said, hey, you should do this, but it's just getting involved. It started at that very, very local level. And that was just probably 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, so I would say the next thing that people really should consider getting involved in is on April 1st, which is a Tuesday, at the State House, Hoosier Action, one of our organizations
Yes.
that we talk about a lot, they are leading an event, a Protect Medicaid Day of
Protect
Action.
Medicaid. And they have done a considerable amount of work with trying to protect Medicaid. And we'll have to talk about them more because they are, I did mention them a couple of times in the video.
Yeah, yeah, and so I would definitely invite people to attend that, and I'll
What time
send you.
is it at?
It starts at 11 a.m.
Okay.
and then they have lunch provided for people that are registered.
What
So
is
that.
that? So when I did go to something like that
Mhm.
last year in February, and I think it was about testing strips, fentanyl testing strips.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
I'd never been to something like that, and it was pretty cool. But can you kind of tell people kind of like what happens at that? So if they want to go, they kind of
Yeah,
know what
yeah.
to expect, and if they want
Yeah.
to make a statement or whatever, how they can prepare.
Um, Yeah, so I don't know as far as speakers go, if I assume they probably already have that set up. However, I believe they will be capturing stories from people or have spaces for people to connect, because this is an ongoing conversation and things.
Mhm.
So, um, but usually when you get there, there's going to be a press conference. They're going to be talking about the legislation and where we're at and what steps need to do. And then they're actually going to have opportunities for people to meet with legislators.
Okay.
So that's definitely the more people we have, especially from our rural districts further
Yes.
afield, the more important it is, because it's very often that they can see some of the more local, like Marion County people and all that, but they
Mhm.
don't so often see people from Scott County, for
Right.
example.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other event that's happening next week, Saturday on April 5th, that is a big rally, and I believe you've actually got something down in New Albany, so
Mhm.
that's a closer destination. But 5051 Movement and Indivisible and several other aligned organizations are doing what they call the Hands Off rally. And this is really pushing back at the national, pushing back against Elon Musk and Doge and the basically where Donald Trump is setting himself up as a king, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so in these rallies, again, it's all nonviolent resistance. People are bringing signs. People are going to be just mobilizing to show that we are wanting our democracy back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if again, I believe it's at noon in New Albany.
Okay.
There's also from noon to 4 at the State House in Indianapolis too.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so we'll
Good.
have
Good.
on that.
All right. Well, thank you so much. There's just so much going on, and there's all sorts of stuff. Probably going to be going on for at least the next month or so with the state house and
Yeah.
whatnot. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks.